activities. So can everyone please put their hands together virtually and give Anika a huge welcome to, I'd love to say the City of Greater Bendigo, the digital City of Greater Bendigo. Anika, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ian, and thank you for such a kind introduction too. And great to hear what RACV is doing, David. Thank you so much for giving us that presentation. Good evening, everyone. It is just such a pleasure to be here with you all. I've really been looking forward to this event, and I know we're just meeting virtually, but I'm so pleased that we are doing this. And before I kick off my presentation, I really, honestly and humbly want to thank you for having me here, because I know that you are the experts of your region. You are the experts of your agricultural systems and your communities. So I am definitely not here to give you answers and tell you what you need to do, but rather tonight I hope to motivate, to share ideas, to describe what some other farmers and communities are doing across the country, and really to encourage conversation where you can identify the best pathway forward for your community and your local agricultural systems. So bear with me one moment while I bring up my slides here.
I should say while you're doing that, Anika, if people have questions, whack them in the chat and we can choose some to ask at the end.
Absolutely. So I have chosen the title of tonight's presentation to be Cultivating Climate Courage, a Roadmap to a Low Emissions Agricultural Future, because I do believe that we are living in a time where we need to grow courage to confront and overcome the challenges that we face, and to tell our stories in a way that is honest, that is authentic, and that inspires hope and action. Because I know that we all want to create a future for agriculture that is resilient, that is sustainable, that is productive, and that is good for both people and the planet. And we need to do that by developing a roadmap for a better farming future. And to do that, we need courage to change the system that is currently in place. So courage to create a just and a fair future by disrupting the status quo now. Courage to look at the problems facing land, water, plants, animals, communities in the eye, knowing that we can and we should do something to fix it. So who am I? My name is Anika Molesworth. I'm a farmer, a scientist, and a storyteller. And I'm here to share a part of my story and to bring to light some of the challenges and the opportunities for us in rural and regional Australia. And in doing so, I will explain why farmers like myself are striving to create better farming and environmental systems, and how by working together we can make our future the best it possibly can be. So let's begin. So I want to take a moment for you to think of a place that you feel connected to, a place where you feel like you belong. I want you to think of the colors, the sounds, the fragrance, a place where you could almost put your hand on that earth and feel your own heart beating. A place that is both your home and your heart. So for me, it is this place. My family and my home are located in a land of ruby red soils and sapphire blue skies in far western New South Wales. It is a place where you could walk all day and not see another person, but you would see a lot of kangaroos and wedge-tailed eagles gliding above. You would see tiny, dainty wildflowers which form a carpet at your feet. And when you breathe in deeply here, there's a sweet, arid fragrance in the air. And this is Willakali country, where Willakali people have lived for tens of thousands of years, alongside the most extraordinary and unique creatures that scuttle between the saltbush, like the barrier ranger's dragon, and plants with the most exquisite tasting fruits, like the cherry red quandong. And the traditional owners of Australia have over 60,000 years of living alongside the Australian landscape and of telling stories, both of heartache and of hope, and the role that ecosystem health plays in shaping our past, our present, and our future. And I feel so honoured and privileged to live and work on Willakali country, where Willakali people continue their connection to land, water, plants, animals, and culture. And I pay my respect to the traditional owners of all the places that we are meeting on today. And as a child, I was in awe of this landscape. I was absolutely caught in its magic. And my life of possibilities seemed as endless as those horizons. And I grew up here with my brothers going horse riding and camping. And I learned a lot about respecting the land and having pride in growing food from it. Food that goes to feed and nourish people. And what a privilege it is to be able to do that, to be a food producer, to work with nature. And whenever I was asked as a child, what do you want to be when you're older, I was very quick to respond. I want to be a farmer. I want to produce food for people. I want to live and work alongside the natural world. And so you might imagine my heartache when I started to question whether actually that was indeed possible, because the land that I fell in love with as a child started to change before my eyes. Dust storms are like monsters that crawl along the landscape and devour everything in their path. And if you're outside in a dust storm, the sand stings your skin like lashes from a whip, and you have to hold a cloth to your face so you can breathe. And as I'm sure many of you know, this monster walks hand in hand with a thief, because a drought is a thief. First it takes your rain, then the plants start to disappear, then it steals the feed and water for your livestock. So as the drought continues, you sell more and more of your animals, the trucks carry them away into the distance. Farm income dries up as fast as the water evaporates from the dams and the creeks, and then the wildlife goes, and the paddocks become silent. And you don't realize how much you miss the sound of birdsong until you don't hear it anymore. And then the drought starts stealing people. People move away as the drought takes their job. Mental health deteriorates, with worry and depression seeping into cracking minds. This was a video I took of my home in the midst of a drought that was gripping hard, and the dust storms were a weekly occurrence. And I watched the wind scour the land, stripping it of vegetation, removing nutrients and seeds from the soil. And this landscape that I had fallen in love with at an early age was being damaged before my eyes, and it absolutely broke my heart. And the drought made me stop and question the way that we people are interacting with the world. What pressures are we putting upon it? What asks are we making of it? We know we're interacting with the planet, but what are the impacts of those interactions? And so it was this drought that made me question, are we really doing our best? And it was the realization that no, we're not. Experiencing heat waves, droughts, dust storms becoming more common made me realize that I can't stand on the sideline as a silent witness, watching the people in the place that I care about suffer. I yearned to know how to look after my home. And so this is my driver. This is the start of my story, my why, but it's definitely not the end of my story. Because it was living through the drought that made me aware of how connected people are to nature. Because farmers and rural Australians, we have a deep sense of belonging to land, a sense of place. We are land custodians, we are land stewards, we have a feeling of responsibility to look after our homes. And as a farmer, the land, water, climate is our bedrock, it's our foundation, not only for farming businesses, but for our homes, our families, our culture. And we know that a degraded natural environment is a degraded future. And as I became more engaged and concerned about the deterioration of the natural world around me, the impact it was having on people that I care about, I asked myself, well, what can I do? And so I started studying science to try and understand what is happening, because knowing the problem means that we have a chance to fix it. And so over this time of studying science and gaining a master's and then a PhD, I became very aware of the big challenges facing our world, the pressures we are putting upon it by a rapidly growing global population. By this time tomorrow, there will be nearly 250,000 new mouths to feed. Now, if that wasn't concerning enough, we're currently losing productive land, arable land, pastures, forests are disappearing, and at a rate that far outpaces the Earth's ability to naturally restore and replenish these areas. Plant and animal species prevalence and distribution is changing, and so is related pests and diseases. There is a global trend of rural to urban migration and a widening disconnect between people living in the cities and the farmers who feed and clothe them. We know that we are extracting, consuming, and polluting in a way that is doing serious harm to ourselves and to all future generations. And we need to stop, to take notice, to understand our responsibility at this moment in history. Because the world is not the same as past generations. The world our parents and our grandparents grew up in is no longer. And we here now need to realize that and to use that knowledge to act. This is a map showing global temperature, and you will see as this visual tracks through the last 141 years that global temperatures are becoming hotter, which is indicated by the yellow, the orange, and the red. And you will also see an acceleratory effect, that these changes are happening at a faster rate. And so here we are in the 1920s when my grandparents were born, the 1930s now, moving into the 1940s, the 1950s when my parents were born, the 60s, 70s, the 80s. This is when I'm born, the 90s. Anyone with teenage kids, they're born around here. And then grandkids, toddlers, they're born into this world. Year after year, season after season, records are smashed in high temperatures, in low rainfall, or devastating floods, and anyone under the age of 45, we have never known a year of global average temperatures. So the question I ask myself is, how are farmers going to deal with this? How are we going to feed a hungry world if we allow climate change to run away, to become irreversible? For farmers, climate change is not an abstract concept. It is something that we see playing out in real time in the form of extreme weather events like droughts, floods, and bushfires, of changing rainfall patterns and higher temperatures, of disruptions to native plants and animals. So climate change is not a concern for the future or the other side of the world. It is a crisis right here, right now. Our world is changing, and we here today bear a responsibility to change with it, to adapt, to do something different, something more appropriate for this moment in history. Because we live in a hungrier world where population growth is driving food demand, We live in a wealthier world where a new middle income class is increasing food and fiber consumption. We have changing customers who are choosier, information empowered, with expectations of health, providence, and ethics. But as I mentioned earlier, there is that disconnection between urban and rural communities. We do have new technologies that are changing food production, transportation, manufacturing, and consumption. But we are in for a bumpier ride. And it is this bumpier ride that I became interested in. Because if I'm going to have a future on my farm, if I'm going to have a chance to produce food for people, then I need to work out how to help solve these problems. And I want to work alongside other people who are trying to help solve them as well. Because if we don't front up to these challenges, then who will? And I know sometimes these conversations feel so big and complex that we forget the basics, which are actually pretty simple. So I want to spend less than 1 minute, 40 seconds, just describing what climate change is. So when you are communicating this to your communities, to your business, you can also, know in a clear and succinct manner what the problem is, what's driving it. So what is climate change? 101. Solar radiation in the form of light waves passes through the atmosphere. Most of this radiation is absorbed by Earth. Some energy is radiated back into Earth's atmosphere. Some energy is radiated back into space in the form of infrared waves. And some of the outgoing infrared radiation is trapped by Earth's atmosphere and warms it. Now, as greenhouse gas concentrations increase, more of the outgoing infrared radiation is trapped, and so Earth becomes hotter. So in essence, it's like putting a big blanket over the planet. The thicker the blanket is, the more heat is trapped. And this blanket is made up of the pollution we are putting into our skies. That's it. We know a lot about what's causing these problems. We know what the major sources of greenhouse gas emissions are, which are disrupting our climate and having serious impact on the health and condition of land, water, and human systems. And we've actually had that science at hand for decades. It's the way we get around and transport ourselves and our goods. It is the way we produce food and fibers in agricultural systems. It is the way we manufacture and use industrial processes. And most critically, it is the energy we use and the burning of fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas. We know so much about what is driving these environmental problems that we face. But the recognition of this science does feel at times overwhelming and daunting, and I'm sure I'm not the only one in the room tonight who has felt that way. But we have a choice. But we alive today get to choose whether we ignore this problem, which will result in a very unfortunate fate for our environment, our families, and all those who come after us, or we choose to use the wealth of information and evidence that we have to change the system. Because we know what's causing the problems. We understand the impacts that these are having. But do we have the courage to change? And when I look around the farming sector and the rural community, when I speak to people, from the Bendigo Greater City Council and the community, it is a resounding yes. Yes, we have the courage. And I actually see so many reasons to be hopeful about our future. Because we are not without answers, we are not without solutions. Emissions can be reduced on farms, and the environment can be better taken care of through so many technologies and practices. For example, methane can be reduced from livestock with feed supplements and selective breeding. Reforestation of degraded land can capture carbon in plants and soils and increase biodiversity. We can electrify the transport system And as an electric vehicle owner myself, I can tell you EVs don't ruin weekends, and I would love to see more of them cruising around the country. We can improve land practices with better fertilizer use, fire management. And these are just some of the technologies and practices that are already being deployed in the farming system, which cut out greenhouse gas emissions and help us look after our natural resources. Farmers are striding ahead in these areas because we understand the importance of looking after land, water, plants, animals, and the climate. We understand the connection between planetary health and human health. And we know that what we do today and how we treat the planet for the next few years will shape it forever and for everyone. And when we look at the future and consider technologies and practices under research, one can't help but feel excited. Now, this is just a simple list of future food system changes being studied that have been identified to make farming more sustainable and environmentally responsible. And apologies for all the words on this slide, but I want to make a point. When people say, we don't have solutions or we don't know what to do, I say rubbish. I say we have an abundance of solutions, abundance of options right at our fingertips. We know how to reduce carbon emissions from food and farming systems with reduced tillage, with less soil carbon disturbance. We know how to reduce methane from our livestock and their waste and use it for bioenergy. We know how to reduce nitrous oxide emissions with enhanced efficiency fertilizers and organic soil amendments. We know how to prevent runoff, infiltration, and contamination of soil and waterways from nutrients and pesticides. We also know the importance of native biodiversity and have seen ecosystems restored to good health when pests and diseases have been managed and local native species have been brought back from the brink of extinction. We have an abundance of ways to better look after land, water, plants, livestock, and our future. And everywhere I turn in rural Australia, I see ordinary people doing the most extraordinary things. People showing that they have the courage to change the way that we live alongside the planet. People who are changing the story, who are shaping the legacy that we want to leave. And they're not doing it for reward or title or recognition, but because they believe that we could do something better, that we should do something better. There are so many fantastic initiatives and work being undertaken. But because of the rate and the scale of the climate crisis, we need to do more than what we are currently doing. We need to amplify and expand our efforts. So the question we arrive at now is, how do we use our wisdom and skills to change the system? We are not limited by knowledge of the problem or by measures available, but by other obstacles, structural, cultural, political, which inhibit the pace and scale of implementation which is needed to achieve our goals. It is as though we lack courage. And because of this, implementation of solutions currently lags behind our potential. And this has to change. This Greater Bendigo region event is about sharing ideas. It is about working together to look after our homes and our communities. And you are in this room because you are problem solvers, because you understand that human health and community well-being is completely dependent on the health of the environments in which we live and work. So how do we use this moment to create the greatest future? Well, there are so many ways to drive change for the better, but 3 I want to touch on because I think these are critical are that we need to grow the number of people who are educated, engaged, and who feel empowered. We need to bring policies and strategies in line with the science. And we need to change the way we tell the story. So to that first point, we need people to be aware of the science, aware of what it tells us, and we shouldn't dismiss it or downplay it, as challenging as it may be, but to step up and believe that we can and we should do something with it, because knowing the problem means that we can do something about it. And this means speaking with a diversity of people from different ages, regions, socioeconomic backgrounds. This is a photo of me zooming into a school to speak with the next generation of food producers and consumers. And these students ask the best questions. They are creative and critical thinkers. And that's what we need, because we do not learn by talking to ourselves in the mirror. We learn by speaking with diverse minds, with dissimilar thinkers. To the second point, we need to bring policies and strategies in line with the science. So I am one of the founding directors of Farmers for Climate Action, which is an inclusive movement of farmers and rural Australians leading the way on climate solutions. And we have nearly 8,000 farmers who have banded together because they believe that we can create a better farming system, and that by advocating together, we can positively influence our sector and the government to implement climate policies that reduce pollution and benefit rural communities. And I really do encourage you to check out their website, follow them on social media. Everyone is welcome, part of this community of action. And Farmers for Climate Action has actually just launched a report this week outlining the need for a national plan for climate change in agriculture and the key policies that need to support farmers to cut emissions and increase farm productivity. So it's very well timed for this webinar tonight, actually. And this report is based on the engagement of more than 600 farmers around Australia from all different industries. And the key messages from surveys and consultations is that farmers need emission reduction and innovation. We need resilient landscapes. We want thriving communities and secure markets. But how do we actually do that? What is the pathway to achieve these things? And as mentioned before, after my presentation, you will be discussing these topics because you are the experts in your region, and no one is more equipped than you to come up with that appropriate roadmap. At a broad national scale, the farmers who were part of this report suggested things that, like support for farmers to invest in emission reduction technologies that are currently available but cost prohibitive, the funding of on-farm extension programs to enable producers to understand, measure and reduce emissions, the creation of a network of dedicated carbon farming extension officers, the commitment to fund long-term the National Soil Action Plan, develop a new National Resilience Fund to help rural communities prepare for natural disasters that they may face, improve benefit sharing arrangements for energy transmission hosts and communities, streamline processes and provide assistance to farmers wanting to participate in government programs, a national agricultural risk assessment to monitor existing and emerging risks and best response, and establish a standardized system to enable farmers to properly and accurately measure sustainability. So when you are thinking about the agricultural roadmap for your region, this report might provide some interesting ideas for consideration, and that's available on the Farmers for Climate Action website. And so back to the third point, which I think is really important to drive change in this space, is that we need to change the way we tell the story, that we need to bring the humanity back into the climate conversations, that we should talk about our challenges with all of our fears, concerns, worries, hopes, excitement, vision. Because yes, it does feel easier to sit this one out. Yes, it would be easier to stay quiet and not speak up, but we really don't have time for that. We need to act in a way that is not only equal to, but greater than the rate and the scale of the challenges at hand. And telling our stories is really important to do this. So we need to communicate climate change in a way that is local, that is personal, that is urgent. We need to tell stories from the heart. We should push ourselves to speak so that our voices are heard, and heard by people who are inadequately engaged and inadequately responding. And this does mean stepping out of our comfort zones, having the courage to talk with dissimilar thinkers and doers. So what does a better story of the food and farming system actually look like? When we open our minds to the future of agricultural production, our vision should be nothing less than exciting. It is a place powered by renewable energy, clean, unlimited energy with low production costs and low air pollution. It is a place where technology and innovation are only limited by our dreams and ambition, where precision agriculture is using our resources wisely, that we are recycling them in cyclical systems. It is a place where traditional knowledge is celebrated, where we embrace unique foods and flavors of Australian native produce. It is a place where there is food connection and respect for agriculture. And this starts by changing the education system, engaging the next generation, having food and farming part of every curriculum. And it's a place where we've reimagined what food is and engage in challenging conversations about what a planet-friendly diet actually looks like. It's changing the definition of what a farm is and what a farmer does, and using art and design and imagination to upscale positive change, to embrace exciting transformation. And our visions should be bold. They should be courageous, constantly pushing the boundaries for better and connecting people to the planet, moving from egocentric thinking to eco-centric thinking, to recognize that we are part of the natural world and to be guided by it in all that we do. Because nature is cyclical, it is adaptive, it is regenerative, it is ever evolving. And that's what we need to design our human systems to be as well. The only real model of true sustainability is the natural world. By shifting mindsets and behaviors from extraction to regeneration, from linear to circular, from domination to altruism, we can create farming systems which are good for people as well as the planet. So with all of this knowledge and understanding, the question is, how do we use it? How do we move from a place of awareness to action? And do I have the courage to help change the system? So this Greater Bendigo and region event allows us that opportunity to form new connections, new friendships, to identify ways in which we can collaborate and move action and implementation of strategies forward. We are here to push the conversations further, to move from a place of awareness to activity. And you are the leaders in your fields, you are the leaders of your region. That's why you're here. And right now, the world desperately needs your leadership. But leadership is not about a title or a position in a hierarchy. The suits and solutions are not synonymous. Leadership is about being engaged about doing one's best despite the odds, believing that something better is possible, and acknowledging that these great challenges face us now is not done lightly. But that's where courage comes into it. The word courage actually comes from the French word cœur, meaning heart. And in its earliest forms, the word's meaning to be courageous meant to speak one's mind by telling all one's heart. So here I am, speaking my mind, telling my heart, and inviting you to do the same. But having climate courage is even more than that. Most importantly, it is about action. So what am I doing? So on our family farm, we have set up a number of conservation reserves where we are protecting rare and threatened species and removing invasive species. We are involved in a number of citizen science projects, as well as having universities run trials on our property. We're getting off fossil fuel dependency and have solar panels and an electric vehicle. We are adapting our livestock grazing practices to focus on biodiversity conservation and are part of wildlife rehabilitation efforts. And I'm also learning to step out of my comfort zone to work alongside others who hold a vision in their mind of something better, such as you all here today. And everywhere I look, I see people stepping up and speaking out. I see people wanting to tell a better story of our world and of the food and farming sector. And I am so proud to be part of the farming community, to be surrounded by people who are as determined as they are dreamers of a better future. And experts like yourself in Bendigo, Loddon, Mallee, Grampians have such an important role to play in shaping that future that is good for your region, good for its businesses, its people, and for the environment. So climate change brings us this opportunity to reimagine our interaction with the world, to step up and to do things differently, to do things better. And now is that time to use our wisdom and skills to act. And I encourage you, I challenge you to do just that. Recognize what the science is telling us. Work together in a coordinated and collaborative manner. Help bring policies in line with the science. And change the story by speaking your mind and telling your heart. So what is climate courage? For me, it is this. Climate courage is to have the mental and moral strength to withstand the fear and difficulty met when we confront the climate challenge and still choosing to act, knowing that something better is possible. So it has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you all this evening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for facing our challenges and working together to implement the solutions to create the roadmap for your region. You are the problem solvers that the world needs, and I wish you a world of courage.